One thing I am so enraged by and so angered by, and I hate more than anything right now, and I've not made a video on this, and I've been thinking it for weeks, and I've been seeing things, and my blood's been boiling every time I see this, and I've been telling myself, you've got to make a video on this, not even for the fans, just for me, just to get this off my chest. And look, I can't stand Daniel Cormier, and I can't stand his bias towards wrestling and people he trains with, and his delusion when it comes to the skill level of these American wrestlers and how it transitions into MMA, and how a lot of these world champions, are all American wrestlers, and it's really not true. Bilal Muhammad, okay, John Jones, okay, they both have an American wrestling base, but it's been said before, these Caucasians, these Russians, these Dagestanis, these Georgians have a much better transitional game when it comes into the UFC and comes into MMA, and Daniel Cormier ignores it. He's so biased, he's so frustrating, and his knowledge of what works in MMA at the moment is so skewed by his wrestling and his bias. And I want to talk about this. The bias of wrestling when it comes to the UFC is absolutely mental, first of all. What happens if someone gets a takedown, there's lots of control time, they don't do anything with it? What happens if one of those judges wrestled in high school? What happens if one of those judges has a bias? Oh, look at how he's grinding up against the cage. Look how he's holding him in half guard, rubbing his balls on his leg. Like, this is the type of thing we're thinking about. This is the sport of fighting. This is mixed martial arts. This is about inflicting pain and damage and effective strikes on your opponent. If absolutely nothing's happening and you're laying on the person, and the other person has got enough no damage, you've got enough no damage, I understand using that as a scoring criteria. I personally think if you're from a certain region of the world, or if you've got like an accolade, oh, this guy was a all-American fucking college champion, and you do no damage, I think control time, in a really biased way, is scored higher for you. If Chimaev gets a takedown and does nothing with it, You value that takedown more because you know how good at wrestling Khamzat Chimaev is. And again, he's not even an American wrestler. Bo Nickel gets a takedown. Yeah, he's a very good homegrown American talent. He's not as scary as a Dagestani. He's not grown up with the thought of, okay, this wrestling is going to be used in MMA. It's simply just, Henry Cejudo. I don't look at Henry Cejudo and predict before a fight, oh, Henry's going to go out there and get a double leg in the open. Henry's going to get a single leg against the cage and drive him to the floor. No. You don't think that about American wrestlers in today's society, in the dynamic when it comes to mixed martial arts nowadays. It's all just skewered and biased, and Daniel Cormier has just come out and said you're wrong, and that American wrestling is like the pinnacle, and he's biased because he's a wrestler. He loves wrestling. He was a champion in wrestling, and he came over and transitioned well. He transitioned well when the best defensive grappler in your division at the time was maybe an Anderson Silva or an Alexander Gustafsson. Obviously ignoring John Jones, he's kind of the enigma in this situation. His wrestling translates very well because he's got that aggressive single leg sort of style. He's kind of got more anti-jiu-jitsu than effective submission wrestling. I could go off on so many tangents here, but it bothers me. This whole dynamic nowadays bothers me, of how they're counting control time more for people that have accolades rather than, if Sean O'Malley, Conor McGregor, if any of these notoriously known strikers, if Dustin Poirier goes out there and gets a takedown against somebody, it's, oh, look at this, Poirier got a takedown, but he did nothing with it. If anyone else did it, if Chimaev gets a takedown and does nothing with it, it's Chimaev's top pressure and top control is second to none. We know how dangerous he is. If Bo Nickel gets a takedown, you'll hear DC going, now he's in trouble. It's just not fair. It's just very biased. It's a very bad, obstructed, skewered view on the sport. And I think judging needs to be improved massively. I could make a whole separate video on this. I think the judges biasly are scoring control time for wrestlers that are from a certain region of the planet more than for if it's just your average Joe off the street. And can I just say, Daniel Cormier came out in an interview, and with Chael Sonnen on their podcast, The Good Guy and the Bad Guy, he said, look, Chael Sonnen said Tatiana Suarez couldn't take down Zhang Weili. Tatiana Suarez is a decorated American wrestler. Why couldn't she do that? And all Cormier had to say was, look, Weili made adjustments. She took angles. She made small adjustments that helped her defend the double leg. Is that all it takes? Someone who's currently training out of Bang Tao Muay Thai and MMA, a striking gym from Thailand that does a bit of jiu-jitsu, that does a bit of MMA. It just takes a few adjustments to stuff an all-American wrestler's takedowns in Tatiana Suarez, a decorated wrestler who has, so many accolades, but she's not scary. And granted, it's a woman. Granted, it's a woman from a women's division. But look, Daniel Cormier, I can't stand him commentating. He's so biased towards his guys. He's so biased towards the wrestling. Oh, now all he needs to do is go out here and change levels. It's like, Daniel, you were a double champ in the UFC. You know it's not that easy. Also, you had these big heavyweights and light heavyweights plodding towards you with no backwards movement or lateral movement. It's much easier for you, a decorated Olympian, to transition and get takedowns against bigger, heavier and fatter guys. If you have somebody like Merab who's bucking themselves around the cage, how's Umar meant to track him and take him down? You're just biased. You're biased towards everyone that you train with. And I understand, I'm biased towards people I train with as well. I'd big them up. I'd want them to win. But because they're so good at grappling and get a takedown and do nothing with the takedown does not mean it's more valuable than someone who doesn't have all these accolades getting a takedown. Stop eating, man. You're huge. I just don't like you in the commentary booth. I think you're a dickhead, to be honest. And sitting with fighters and saying, oh, if we were to wrestle, I'd get you. And I get the competitive spirit. I get it. And saying, oh, fighters can't look up at the clock. Back in my wrestling day, shut up. No one cares. You're 40. Yes, you're a phenomenal, bear in mind, you're a phenomenal fighter, a phenomenal champion. However, you have this very obscure view of wrestling because you wrestled fatter, heavier, slower men. And what happened when you didn't? Oh yeah, Stipe, he's a bit more movie, a bit more lateral. He flattened you twice. Oh, John Jones flattened you twice. And you had serious disadvantages. You're clinically obese and you're about 5'11", 5'10", 5'9", whatever it is. I think you're about 5'10". You're just like simping for this college wrestlers, and we've not really seen many of these Americans even come through. It's all the Dagestanis, and yes, they train at AKA, yes, they train at your gym, and yes, they've got fantastic accolades and they're so talented. Does not mean when they're rubbing their balls against somebody in half guard, it's more valuable than if a random Darren Elkins was to do it. Do you know what I mean? It's obscured. The judging's obscured. The bias you have towards the wrestling game is mental. I can respect wrestling. I can respect jiu-jitsu, but at the end of the day, it does not matter what accolades you have. If you're rubbing your balls on somebody's thigh for 15 minutes of a fight, it is boring. We can't call it boring. Oh, you guys are just an uneducated crowd. No. That's just not... I don't fuck with that fight style. You may do it. You may like putting your nose up into somebody's fucking cup, their jock strap, all sweaty. It's not what the UFC fans necessarily want. And I know the judges that are American maybe wrestled in high school, so they value a takedown more. If I take somebody down and I'm holding somebody down, but they're elbowing me from bottom, okay, I'm controlling them, but it's hurting me to control this guy. Let's say Khamzat Chimaev goes out there and he's sat in Usman's guard, but Usman's elbowing him. Oh, Chimaev's so dangerous on the ground. He's not even American. He's not even come from your system. Who's your biggest representative right now? If you're ignoring Bilal Muhammad and John Jones, they were a bit before this time. Right now, the prospect you have, Bo Nickel? He looked appalling in his last fight. And yes, he's learning MMA. He's only been doing MMA a few years. So I massively respect Bo Nickel. He's taking his time. He's getting better. I could very easily make a part 2 on this. I might go away and make a part 2, to be honest, in a few days. I've got so much more I could say. But look, I'm just sick of it. I'm just fed up. He's just annoying. He's coming out here and just saying, this isn't true. American wrestling, and his justification of why Tatiana Suarez couldn't get a takedown is just ridiculous. Also, it only means you have to make a few adjustments. Like, the bias is crazy. His commentary is appalling. He sits and eats when he's commentating fights. You can hear him licking his fingers. Yeah, he was a double champ. It's a lot easier to impose wrestling when you're coming up in that era where the biggest threat is Alexander Gustafsson and Derek Lewis, who you can just take down because they don't move side to side or backwards because they're too big. Ridiculous.